One Taguig FC were once again absolutely brilliant in their 4-1 victory over Aguilas FC last weekend to keep that top spot, to keep the pressure on the other teams around them, and to lead this championship race. So I'm going to break down a few patterns of what they showed tactically against Aguilas in that first half. Diego Cordero here, one of the PFL's commentators, and this is a little bit of a side project of mine. When I'm bored, I make these breakdown videos tactically of PFL matches. So, disclaimer, I think two things can be true at once. I think one Taguig were outstanding, but I think Aguilas will feel that they didn't perform at their best level. They just came off a 2-1 victory against Kaya. I think they will acknowledge that they didn't play the way that they should have in the first half. If they play this match again, I think it's not as steep of a scoreline by halftime. It was 4-0 at halftime. I think Aguilas are a better team than this. I think they'll show that they're a better team than this in the future matches. But it was just an off day for Aguilas. But again, I said two things can be true at once and one Taguig at the same time. We're absolutely brilliant. Now here's the first part of this little tactical pattern that I'm going to break down because it happened around 2 or 3 times in the first half. Whenever the ball was with Milos Kupic, whenever they had the chance, they would attract the press of Aguilas. See Coach Soliman there in their picture, telling the left center back to get really, really wide. What does this do? This attracts the pressure from Aguilas, and that's the whole point of their game plan. They wanted to attract the pressure of Aguilas. They wanted to lure them out so that they have space behind them, and a lot of that was successful in this match. So Aguilas set up in a 4-4-2 formation. And that means that they had a front two during their press. It means that their front two was locked on to the center backs of one Taguig, and their midfield two was locked into the midfield duo of one Taguig, Hartman and Sooma. So they're locked on, they're pressing high. So what one Taguig do is, if you're gonna press us high man to man, we're gonna lure you out so that we bring you out into that pocket, and then they leave space in behind them. So you can see the 2 center mids of Aguilas locked to the 2 center mids of one Taguig, and the 2 strikers locked on to the 2 center backs of one Taguig. So they're being lured out by one Taguig. And because both center mids of Aguilas were lured out, you can see there's a pocket of space for someone to drop into. I think it helps that one Taguig didn't play with a recognized striker. They played with almost two strikers who would sort of just take turns dropping in, and then 2 wingers. But that means that Aguilas have a back 4. They defended with a back 4, and they had to defend against a front 4 from one Taguig. So there's a 4 versus 4. And whenever there's an even battle on the pitch, that will always suit the attackers if the attackers get it right. So you can see the 2 center mids of Aguilas have left a pocket of space for one of the 2 strikers to drop into. That's Agyemang. And he's gonna drag out one center back. So that means that the back 4 of Aguilas has gotten even narrower and turned into a back 3 because one of those center backs has been lured out to follow one of those 2 second strikers who was dropped into that pocket of space. But the most dangerous part about this pattern was the staggered rotation of the front 2 of one Taguig. What does that mean? Since they're a bit positionless, they take turns taking up the same position, and that means that it's very hard to mark them. Because if you're the 2 center backs of Aguilas, you're always going to ask yourself, who am I supposed to be guarding if they're taking up similar situations, similar positions, if they're always rotating, if they're always taking turns, if they're spinning in a circle, there's going to be a window where you have to guard 2 men or you're guarding no one. So you can see the Aguilas center back has jumped really high, and that leaves space for the other one Taguig striker to run into, and that will leave space for the other one Taguig striker who was dropped deep to run into. Very confusing as I explain it, but I hope my PowerPoint has made it clear. But anyway, it's that rotation, that staggered rotation, that fluidless and positionless rotation that has been so hard to guard. Because again, if you're the 2 center backs of Aguilas, when your striker opposition is rotating that much, you will say to yourselves, am I supposed to follow him? Or am I supposed to stay in my position and let the other center back follow him? But it just causes anxiety. It just causes question marks for the 2 center backs of Aguilas, who, again, I don't think they performed to their level. I think they will admit that. I think they are better than what they showed here. But You can see One Taguig ask really, really good questions with these rotations. And this actually leads to one of the goals. Because of that rotation, you can see the center back duo that is supposed to be closer to each other, that is supposed to be flat in the back four, is in a vertical line. That is the last thing you want your center back duo to be, because it makes your back four into a back three. It means you're so narrow, and it means that there's space to run into, because the two fullbacks as well are focused on the two wingers of One Taguig. So basically, the center back that was left behind, who didn't follow his man into midfield, has to deal with an acre of space to defend. And yeah, One Taguig, they are lethal in this range. They made it count, and yeah, they scored from this rotation. Now onto their first goal actually. Not the exact same pattern, but that had similarities. You can see they create pockets of space. The gig left winger Hiraishi had so much pocket of space to exploit in this instance. Shout out as well to the pass that found them, but you can see the rest defense of Aguilas. They didn't pick up, one of their attackers of One Taguig, and it just made it so that once Hiraishi gets the ball, he gets running. And again, I mentioned earlier, when One Taguig get running, it's probably the last thing you want to see as an opposition defense. Again, similar overload in the attacking half from One Taguig. So earlier on, when they scored their first goal, they had a 4 versus 4 in the attacking half that turned into a 3 versus 3. This time, they already get into that 3 versus 3 against the back 3 that was left behind by Aguilas. The left back is the one that has pushed up. And yeah, I mean, this first goal takes a lucky bounce, but it's the sheer fact that you have a 3 versus 3, an even battle in the attacking half. It means that any lucky bounce, which is what happened here, is more likely to drop to a teammate rather than an opponent, because you have the same amount of numbers. But your back line that you're running into is more narrow than how you're positioned. So that means you are gambling on the fact that you're making this 3v3 count. And yeah, boy, they made it count to make this first goal. Similar scenario to our first example of this staggered pattern where the two strikers of One Taguig rotate really well. Again, Milos Kupic here, the goalkeeper from One Taguig, sees that this time the Aguilas press has already been started very, very high up. So he goes long, and that's another strength of this One Taguig team. Physical, and they go direct when they need to. And once again, the two strikers of One Taguig, they lock on to the two center backs of Aguilas, and then they rotate. That means it's hard to follow them, because it means that you're just asking them to pull out of their position to follow you. At the same time, if they stay in their position, then you'll run into space. So that's how smartly these rotations are timed from this positionless front two. If you notice specifically, it's the opposite to how the first example happened. So it was Casimiro on the right and Agyemang on the left. This time, for this example, they've switched positions, and that's just another example of how hard it is to guard them, because they keep switching with each other. And once again, they've forced Aguilas center backs into a vertical line. Once again, one of their center backs, the one who didn't jump, has to defend so much space. Again, he's left alone because the two fullbacks of Aguilas were focused on the wingers. And yeah, after that, it's just a moment of sheer brilliance, magic from Isaac Agyemang to slot it into the far corner. So those were 3 of the goals that One Taguig scored, and absolutely brilliant. And once they were 3-0 up, you could feel that, they had this game in the bag. Here's quickly how that rotation, that staggered rotation from the front two, looks like on a tactics board. You can see, really, that there's so much space for that front two to run into. But they make it even more valuable with their rotation, because they both run into the right corridor. They both run into the right channel where the other striker is not. So it's that awareness of where your other strike partner is that makes them so hard to play against. And again, remember, they did this without Patrick Reichelt as well. So yeah, that was it for my analysis on One Taguig. It's actually Saturday when I'm filming this, and they play later today against Stallion. That'll be a good match. I think Stallion would have noticed this as well. I think they have Usman Baji and Kent Pride in their center back duo. I think they will try to solve this problem in their own way. That'll be a great match. It might have been done by the time you're watching this, but that will be a great match. Diego Cordero once again with another analysis video. one more month of the PFL to follow. Been a very exciting season, and it's gonna come to a really good conclusion. Thank you for watching. So glad you could join this analysis video, and I'll see you guys soon.